Heads up, this episode of Schmeitgeist, as always, contains some explicit language.
ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music, and more.
Okay, so this one was hard to predict. But today's episode of Schmeitgeist is about Catholicism.
I'm Godlover Kyle. I am a page administrator for an Instagram meme page called I Need God in Every Moment of My Life.
And right now you're wondering, is that title ironic? Or does Godlover Kyle really need God in every moment of their life? But the truth is, not even Kyle knows the answer to that question.
We get comments that are like, is this satire or not? Are you actual Christians? It's just the theme is God.
Either way, all 112,000 of Kyle's followers are there for it.
Basically, it started as a group chat between 4 people, and we would just send each other God stuff, and we thought, you know what? This is a huge trend. God is trending.
I'm Angela Poitier, and this is Schmeitgeist, the podcast from ABC Everyday that decodes the biggest and weirdest trends in pop culture, coming to you from Gadigal land. And today we want to know, is Kyle right? Is God trending?
I think it definitely is. There is something about the visual signs and signifiers that are associated with the Catholic Church, which are like really fun and interesting to use. They are familiar, but also exotic.
Because it does seem like Catholicism is having a moment. I mean, there's an Australian fashion label called Catholic Guilt selling a $400 chainmail bra made from gold crucifixes. It's in pop music, whether that's Lil Nas X film clips or Sam Smith and Kim Petras reviving satanic imagery in Unholy. We've even been blessed with Catholic alt-left internet personalities.
When I went to Latin Mass, I cried a lot. And then I met all these lovely Catholic Gen Zers, Zoomers.
So is this actually happening? Or is it an optical illusion triggered by spending too much time online? And if cool Catholicism is real, then why is the most progressive generation in history suddenly so interested in one of the most reputationally challenged religions in the world? Okay, so here's the thing. This trend, insofar as people agree it exists and there is debate, is a really hard one to pin down. So, for starters, Christians have always been there, right? Telling other people about Christianity, well before social media and trend podcasts existed. Trust me, I used to be one. And if you go on social media right now and try to find a Christian, you won't have any problems. Because of course Christians and Catholics post. It's 2023 and we're all online. So in that sense, what trend? But when we talk about the Catholic trend, we're talking about something different. We're talking about an emergent constellation of young, usually conventionally hot people, often with a public profile, suddenly wanting to associate with Catholicism. And unlike your garden variety online Christian, they're not trying to convert anyone. It feels much closer to branding. Or if I'm being kind, self-expression. And it's usually coming from the kind of person who wouldn't have been doing this, say, 5 years ago. And that meme account, I Need God in Every Moment of My Life, and its spin-off podcast by the same name, is just one corner of that constellation.
It's a Gen Z way of religion.
God is like, I'm over here now. I'm over here now.
Oh my God. Do you need God?
In every moment of my life.
Yeah, do you think there's a necessity?
I feel like even when I was an atheist or whatever, I was never really an atheist.
The church is a supernatural body.
God bless every one of us.
It's almost like a set of rules to make people be chill.
So these are podcasters, models, writers, musicians, artists. They're these unlikely candidates from the top of the social strata, mostly in New York and LA, who are talking about God in public and dabbling in Catholic aesthetics.
Breaking: Kourtney Kardashian and Travis Barker face backlash over disrespectful Catholic wedding.
We would have got married in a Catholic church, and it would have made a lot of sense since we were both brought up Catholic.
Well, I was brought up Christian.
Oh, I was brought up Catholic. I went to catechism. I went to Catholic school.
I did go to Catholic school, though, since 7th grade and high school.
And what's interesting to me about this group is that they want to be seen next to God. They want to be understood that way. Aside from their actual beliefs, they have decided on some level that an association with Christianity, whether it's explicit or ambiguous or maybe even satirical or New Age, is going to work to their advantage. Or at the very least, the idea of God is no longer embarrassing for people in these circles in the way it used to be. And God Lover Kyle is right in the thick of it, posting from that account, I need God in every moment of my life, every day.
Religious, spiritual, memes, kind of across the spectrum, anything goes, humorous or weird. It's just the theme is God.
For people who have not seen it, who are like, what kind of meme account is this? Like, what's the flavor of the humor? Like, what's the vibe? Do you have like an elevator pitch or a way to describe it to them?
That is such a good question, because it's kind of part of it maybe is it has an indescribable quality, or maybe it has a certain confusing quality to it, so that a lot of people who encounter it have to kind of ask themselves, is this satire? Is this not? Is this serious? Are they religious? And I think like that is kind of the point and the theme of the page, really.
You are kind of the perfect example of like what we're trying to talk about with this episode, because I've literally been like trying to nail down this moment that Christianity and Catholic aesthetics are having online, because it is so deliberately ambiguous. And you're like, yeah, we're ambiguous. Like you're saying unambiguously, we're ambiguous, which is quite funny to me.
Yes. It's not, there's kind of unambiguously ambiguous is such a fun way to think of it. I love the contradictory things and the paradoxical things of life. And I think those things relate to religion and spirituality, obviously, like things that are unanswerable questions and the mystery of life itself, you know?
Yeah, I do know. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of that ambiguity stems from the fact that the posts are funny, depending who you ask. Like there's a salad with a giant crouton in the shape of a crucifix, a tattoo of Kermit the Frog on the cross, and this very special TikTok repost.
When I was 14, my mother died. Now she's at the cookout in the sky, partying it up with God and Jesus Christ. So she didn't really die, because now she has eternal life.
On the other hand, there are also posts where the joke is based on empathizing with the religious experience. Like a meme of a CGI movie character holding a gun with the text, people be like, oh, so you're a Christian, huh? Resolve every problem I have with God. So you can see why people are confused. Some of the content scans as being critical of religion, and some of it is explicitly at the expense of atheists. I'm interested in what kind of demo you see with your audience and what kind of engagement you get.
Sure, yeah. I would say it's mostly millennials and Gen Z. So mainly anyone from maybe 18 to 40 is kind of the main audience here. I think I do see a few different maybe segments of different kinds of people who would gravitate towards it. One would be like people who suffer from addiction and are looking for ways to kind of approach spirituality, even if they don't necessarily believe in God or believe in a religion, like having a higher power or a relationship to one, and just being reminded about God is helpful for that kind of person. Similarly to people who are like ex-Christians or who have left a faith, for them, having a little bit of daily reminders through humor is healing, maybe even, or helpful. And then there are just some people who are straight up like love God or are super religious, but have a sense of humor and are able to be open-minded enough to appreciate different perspectives and stuff like that. It kind of toes a line between believers and non-believers where people may get confused. And that kind of tension between belief and disbelief, or reality and fantasy even, could bridge a gap, basically.
And it's not just this meme page that's ambiguous about its attitudes. It's a pattern that's repeated throughout this whole subset of cool Catholicism. Even though sometimes, at least in Kyle's case, there is real belief underneath it all. Because Kyle is what's sometimes called a cradle Catholic.
I was raised into my mother's side of the family. They are completely Sicilian. So Catholicism has always just been such a deep part of their culture. I went through all the sacraments. I'm confirmed Catholic. And I also sang at Mass every week until I graduated high school. So whether or not I really truly believed in it growing up was almost irrelevant. It was just something we did. I would still say that technically, yes, I'm Catholic, but I have my own approach and, my own interiority about how I come to terms with that and what I necessarily believe within that. So, culturally, I can't deny I'm Catholic. Yeah.
It is complicated, though, because in 2023, you might run a meme page about God and call yourself a Catholic, but also be an astrologer.
Neptune is transiting through Pisces, so it really makes sense that there is a resurgence of astrology, tarot, spirituality, religion. Even using Christianity in a New Age way, I feel like is very popular and right now. And I think, in my mind anyway, in my astrologer worm brain, I'm like, oh, it's definitely has to do with this period of Neptune in Pisces. They correlate too well.
And again, this tracks. Like in season 1 of Schmeitgeist, we talked about how a part of astrology's appeal with Gen Z and millennials is that it doesn't demand total adherence. People can customize it, just like they're customizing Catholicism.
People love to ask the question, do you believe in astrology? But astrology is like a tool, it's a practice, it's something that you do. I don't necessarily believe in astrology. I practice astrology, I experience astrology, I kind of learn and study astrology, but I believe in God. Mm-hmm. And I believe that God has a plan, and I believe in fate.
For what it's worth, Kyle does see the same trend I see here. That is, not the usual suspects, playing with Catholic aesthetics and ideology.
Yeah, I do also pick up on that pattern. I think that it is real. And maybe over the course of the last century, religion has become this thing that's almost stigmatized, maybe, or seen as of the past or backward. And obviously, in many ways, maybe it could be characterized that way, like faithfully characterized that way. But we're also seeing that it's not really going away, like I said. And so instead of just straight up abandoning it, some people are saying that it could be important for them to belong to something like a religion.
I'm interested in, these are not the words you use, but this is kind of what I took away. Religion being seen as this older, irrelevant, outmoded thing, and young people basically doing their own version of it.
Yeah.
And it leaves room for people's misgivings almost, and different versions of God and spirituality.
Yeah, and for difference of identity too, for people who, identify differently or who feel like they wouldn't belong normally. It's cool to see space carved out for those kinds of people on their own accord, I guess, even though it's happening mostly at home and, in isolated pockets. It shows that there's still a kind of yearning and a kind of hopefulness that we can remake institutions, I guess, or remake traditions that suit who we are now in time. So, yeah, a reclamation.
So Kyle's part in this trend is pretty wholesome in a lot of ways. It's about inclusion and opening the door for people, either away from fundamentalism or towards a more accessible version of God. It's also not the only kind of internet Catholicism. To hear the story of this trend told another way, usually by a certain kind of traditional Catholic, which we'll get to in a second, this pattern is best understood as a long overdue clapback to woke-mania, a return to common sense being led by young creatives in a New York micro-neighborhood called Dimes Square. I'll explain. So a big flashpoint, and maybe the defining flashpoint in this story, came in August last year when the New York Times published this breathless trend piece with the headline, "New York's hottest club is the Catholic Church," which is not an entirely po-faced phrase, by the way. It's a reference to an iconic recurring Bill Hader segment on Saturday Night Live. But the piece itself had a point to make. To unpack it, and to help us map this trend more generally, I sat down with Rohan Salmond, who's a religion and ethics specialist at the ABC's RN. I hope you don't mind me mentioning this, but I think it is, always relevant when you're talking about, in depth about Christianity as we're going to. You're a Christian yourself, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm a member of the Uniting Church, which is a Protestant denomination in Australia.
Cool. Anyway, where were we? That's right. Times Square.
So my understanding is that, Times Square, really sceney, really trendy kind of area of New York, which, again, is very popular with a lot of the people who work in media in New York. And so they're encountering young people who are kind of using Catholic aesthetics as like a countercultural signifier. And in that piece, they're drawing the conclusion that it's like a reaction against like liberal American values or
relevant at this point to mention. So this piece got a lot of backlash for a couple of reasons, but one of them being that the author of the piece was themselves, identified with the conservative Catholic movement, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And when this piece was published, I saw a lot of backlash from people who were engaging in that play with Catholic aesthetics online, and they're saying, no, this isn't what's going on. Like, you are drawing a really long bow.
Right. We're not anti-woke. We just like the way this rosary looks.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So there are a few strands to this trend, and Rohan has done us a huge solid and broken it down into 3 main camps: the dabblers, the weird Christians, and the rad trads. And a disclaimer, this is not an exhaustive list. We made it up, and we know there's overlap, as well as people who do not fit at all. So if you're like, oh, but I hang out on Greek Orthodox Twitter and none of these categories are mine, we know, and we're sorry. By way of an apology, please accept this rudimentary classification system, starting with the dabblers.
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of people for whom these aesthetics are just sort of visually interesting, or the ideas are sort of weird and like good to make jokes with. So it might be people who like when you encounter people saying RIP in peace online, like that's kind of a Catholic idea, right? Like praying for the dead. There's a lot of memento mori, like remember you will die, in my circles. I don't think that's like particularly as widespread, but like I see it around a lot. Like,
well, I feel like you do see a little bit of random Latin around the place.
Yeah, like super Catholic, I think, and like also like kind of funny, like in a dark way.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of like YOLO, but not. I think another example would be the biblically accurate angel meme. Have you seen that around?
Run us through it, please.
So the idea being that in Renaissance art, angels are like these beautiful, like white people with wings. But in certain biblical texts, they're actually like wheels within wheels and covered in eyes and, 6 sets of wings and animal heads everywhere. And like it's all really eldritch horror and like really creepy.
Like Lovecraftian almost. Yeah.
Exactly like that. Yeah. And it's like so rich with visuals and history that you can draw from. And, I use this word a lot, play with. You can subvert those ideas. You can apply them in surprising situations. It's campy. It's fun. Yeah.
Now we arrive at box number 2, which is The Weird Christians, which is, I think, a really funny title. And I'm so glad that it's you that came up with this and not me. Because as like a lapsed Christian, I could only dream of coming up with this. So please tell me who is in the Weird Christians box.
So Weird Christians, I have to give another disclaimer. It is actually broader than just the Catholics. Like it's something that's come out of weird Twitter. And so it's like Christians who are playing with that kind of form of joke making and non sequiturs, that kind of thing.
Let's just rewind for a sec. Can we get a quick definition on weird Twitter?
Oh, that's
I know that's a tall order. Yeah.
Weird Twitter is, I would say, a community of people who are making jokes in a very particular way that's unique to the medium. A lot of it involves non sequiturs or kind of imagined situations that are absurdist. It's often pessimistic
Like a lot of just everything lowercase,
Yep.
no punctuation, right?
Yep, no punctuation, often formatted in very strange ways.
And if you're still wondering what we're talking about, one of the most renowned purveyors of weird tweets on Weird Twitter, as described, is Drill. That's DRIL. For example,
"We are trying to raise $100 for the white newscaster fired for saying yabba dabba doo."
Okay, one more.
Big Bird was obviously just a man in a suit, but the other ones were too small to contain men. So, what the fuck?
And look, we could read you Drill tweets all day, but you get it. That's Weird Twitter, the primordial slime that produced a cohort Rohan is calling Weird Christians.
So the Weird Christians, it's more than just the Catholics, but the Catholic aesthetic, I think, is a big part of this. So it would be people for whom these aesthetics do actually apply in some ways to their own identities.
So it's more meaningful than just aesthetic. That would be a defining thing.
I would say so, yes. So it might be somebody who's been to Catholic school, or who is a Catholic, or who is maybe a Protestant but is playing with some of these Catholic aesthetics, or maybe they have like an academic background in theology or something. And so they're often telling these quite esoteric in-jokes which are written specifically for other weird Christians. So you've got like big discussions on, would you baptize baby Yoda? Which is like, you know, such a weird thing to say. But actually it opens up all of these different ideas about like, are aliens saved by the blood of Jesus? Or like, you know, like, is it colonialism to go to another planet and like baptize an alien life form? Like,
I love that take. I think that's amazing. And this is maybe where God lover Kyle fits. For example, posting pictures of unintentionally erotic signs outside evangelical churches, such as, "He comes again in unexpected places and faces, Sunday, 9:30. Or over on TikTok, you can find an account called Greedy Peasant.
Yeah, so Greedy Peasant he's a guy who lives in New York. He's a illustrator and fashion designer. He makes these really elaborate costumes with like a lot of tassels on them, and they're inspired by medieval like images that you would see drawn in the margins of illuminated Bibles and things like that. So a lot of frills, a lot of tassels, very strange hats, that kind of thing.
Did you see who's in for the holidays? Is that Nancy? Nancy? Are my ears burning? Hi, ladies. Hey, girl, what Catholic relic do you have in there? I've got the whole skull of Mary Magdalene.
But it's very clear that he has at least grown up Catholic. You know, he will make TikToks about why Palm Sunday Mass is the best Mass to go to because you're given a prop, which is like the palm frond, and like all the different things you can do with the palm frond.
You can gently wave it. You can steal your mom's. You can give up and try and steal your dad's palm so that you will be rich.
It's like, it's really campy. It's really fun. And it obviously is part of his identity as, you know, whatever he is. But he's not really explicit about that necessarily. But it does come through in the content.
Okay, now we arrive at, I would argue, the darkest of the three boxes, the box labelled radtrads or integralists, which is a word I didn't know. And these are the people who are posting much more sincerely, but it's complex. Who are we talking about here?
So I would say the radtrads or the integralists are a group of Catholics who believe that if there are enough Catholics in society, society should reflect the dogma of the church, like in its government and its law. And so they are, they're against multiculturalism. They believe that, you know, immigration should be restricted. There's a lot of, I mean, I would say racism as a part of that. Even though, you know, the Catholic faith is universal, like that's what Catholic means. And also it's growing in South America, Asia, and Africa.
And Africa, yeah.
Yeah, so these are people who are engaging with this like European Catholic aesthetic because they believe it is like the pinnacle of Western civilization and that the entire world should reflect this because it is the best thing that humanity has ever done.
Is it fair to say, do you think, that this cultural moment where Catholic aesthetics are just more present is kind of a windfall then for the rad trads, in that it does give them a almost cover to advance their own agenda and maybe even recruit?
Yeah, it is a problem if you believe that democracy is really important and that multiculturalism is generally a good thing. This is
women and queers
and women.
Yeah.
Like, this is a huge problem because you've got people who are on platforms like TikTok, where there are young, impressionable people consuming content away from authority figures that are being fed this idea that, like, Western culture is the best culture. Catholicism is this one specific thing, which, like, it's not. It's quite internally diverse. And this was a big problem on TikTok, even now, but in the last year or so. On the other hand, I think that this opening up of Catholic imagery for use by brands like Praying is quite horrifying to them, because they're seeing these symbols being used in ways that they don't approve of. And in a way, it takes away some of the power that those symbols hold to those rad trads, right?
So that clothing brand that Rohan just mentioned, Praying, is a really great example of that same ambiguity that Godlover Kyle is going for. For example, one of its two owners and designers, Skylar Newman, posted this customer endorsement to TikTok, which I think we can all agree has a sarcastic vibe.
Praying changed my life because now I believe in God. So thank you, Praying. I appreciate you. I appreciate what you do. Namaste.
For people who haven't seen it or come across it, it's like one of their more famous items, I suppose, is this bikini, like a string bikini, and across the two triangles, it's like Father, Son, and then on the bottom half it says, I think, Holy Spirit.
Holy Spirit.
That would make sense. So, like, I think, for example, wearing that bikini is like a safe way for progressives to feel and be edgy.
Mm-hmm. Well, because it is kind of blasphemous, right?
Yes, it's transgressive.
It's transgressive. It associates sexuality, which actually the church is very conservative and you could argue out of line with the values of younger people on. It mixes that with, like, one of the most sacred ideas in Christian theology of the Trinity. And yeah, I think it is maybe a safe way to be edgy.
It's two types of edgy at once.
Yeah.
It's like sacrilegious edgy, so it's like coming after the church, and it's like edgy in the sense that you're associating with Catholicism, which is seen as, anti-progressive.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's a very have your cake and eat it too. It's like, it's double edgy.
It's doing both things at once. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which makes it really, really interesting.
And I think that play for edginess is a part of why this is happening now. It's the tiny kernel of truth in that deeply flawed New York Times piece, labeling the whole thing as anti-woke. Because people have always looked for ways to be edgy, especially young and very online people. The internet we currently have is basically built for extremity. It incentivizes edginess. But if you or all your peers or your potential audience are members of the most progressive generation to date, there are now fewer acceptable ways to be edgy. For example, there is a totally reasonable moratorium on cultural appropriation. And that's where Western Catholic aesthetics come in.
Yeah, I mean, it's exotic but also familiar. And so you've got this set of symbols that you're able to draw from, which you don't see in your everyday life. Like, they are set aside, they're special in a way. And
sacred even.
Yeah, they are sacred. And so they're really ripe for taking and using in different ways, referencing and combining, subverting.
So remember that apparent contradiction we were talking about at the start of the episode? how on paper at least, Gen Z values are totally incompatible with the reputation of modern Catholicism. I mean, covering up child sexual abuse, opposing same-sex marriage, trans rights, reproductive rights, there's gender discrimination. That stuff might suit rad trads, but not the dabblers and weird Christians. And here's the thing, Rohan thinks that reputational damage has made Catholic symbols and aesthetics more memeable, not less.
Partly because of the church's low reputation, there's not a barrier to using them. Like, I think they're less sacred than they used to be, possibly.
They're fair game.
Yeah, they are fair game.
And I think that's the point. The rampant memeing of Christianity is actually destabilizing what a lot of this stuff means, at least to this generation.
It demonstrates that Catholic ideas and aesthetics actually don't just belong to the Catholic Church, and that they are available to be used by anyone, anywhere. To a certain extent, I think this has always been true, but like it's been made really obvious in this cultural moment that anyone can take this and use it.
I mean, it also leaves the door open, and queer people and people who have generally not been the Catholic Church's favorite people have an opportunity to, I guess, take those symbols and reclaim them somehow, or use them, project a different meaning onto them. And that's like a nice kind of redress for them.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me think of the Sam Smith, Kim Petras Grammys performance using satanic imagery, which itself is an inversion of Catholic imagery. Like satanic imagery can't stand on its own. It is always in reference to the Catholic Church. And how
Lil Nas X as well in his film clips.
And like people have been doing this for ages, but like the horror that this inspires. And it's like, it's so predictable in a lot of ways. Like it is deliberately done to horrify particular people in order to, bring about a particular media narrative and, transgressive narrative. But it just goes to show that like anyone can do this. And in fact, people who the Catholic Church has demonized, embracing that label and then using Catholic imagery to subvert it is really interesting and powerful in a lot of ways. And in this current political climate, I think it is a really important cultural phenomenon that's happening, even if we've seen it happen before.
Okay, I'm just going to try something out here. Dear God, thank you for the miracle of podcast distribution so that everyone could listen to today's episode of Schmeitgeist. Thank you for ABC Everyday. Thank you in advance for episode 3 of Schmeitgeist about why everyone seems to be practicing ethical non-monogamy all of a sudden. Not sure you would approve, actually, so I guess also sorry. And thank you for the ABC Listen app, where people can subscribe to hear all our episodes. Amen. Nope, still feels weird.
You've been listening to an ABC podcast. Discover more great ABC podcasts, live radio, and exclusives on the ABC Listen app. Subscribe to listen to more free podcasts or download the ABC Listen app and stream ad-free.